name is Aritha and I'm the Quality Director at iProbono. Today I'm going to speak to you about decriminalization of same-sex relationships and also other social reforms that are happening. Keep your eyes on the reforms. So to decriminalize something is to make something no longer a criminal offense. Be on legalizing or decriminalizing. So when it comes to the whole homosexuality debate and same-sex relations, there is this argument, oh, you're trying to legalize homosexuality. You can't really legalize homosexuality because homosexual people exist anyway, right? So whether the law is there or not, or whether the law recognizes it or not, LGBT people exist. So you can't really legalize something that actually exists. But you can decriminalize certain activities, and that is no longer to make it a criminal offense. So there is no actual bill to decriminalize LGBTQ people. There is a bill to amend the penal code, which would have the outcome of decriminalizing certain sexual conduct. Now, that sexual conduct which will get decriminalized also includes same-sex sexual conduct. Law as it stands currently criminalizes carnal intercourse against the order of nature between man, woman and animal. So as you can see, it doesn't mention the word homosexuality. It doesn't really even speak of homosexual. To understand what this means, you have to look at legal precedents, which means what has courts said that this provision, what is the meaning of this provision. So there have been really some very absurd judgments over the years. Be determining what part of their sexual activity is legal and what is criminal. Courts and the law should not be going so deep into the personal consensual lives of two individuals. It's a gross violation of someone's privacy. So why we say this is decriminalization of same-sex relationships is because same-sex relationships is covered under this. So they were always an easier target. So even though this law has also been used against heterosexual people, it is primarily used against homosexual people. They have been the main target of this law. And that's why gay people have been pushing, LGBT people have been pushing to change this law. That's part one of the law. So there are two laws which are being changed. The second law is the offense of gross indecency. So that criminalizes gross indecency between any persons, whether in public or private. And again, for both these offenses, consent is immaterial. The question then is, what is gross indecency between any persons? So it's not limited to homosexual persons. And this law has been used a lot. I'm sure if you recall police arresting couples for holding hands in a park or kissing in a park. They're using the gross indecency offense to really arrest anyone for anything they want. That is also used primarily against LGBT people. They are also the main target of it, but heterosexual people are also a target of it. This is why changing this law is very important, because it's not just a gay struggle, it's not just an LGBT issue. This really affects the whole of society to amend these laws. So section 365, which criminalizes intercourse against order of nature, is going to be amended. And then 365A, which criminalizes gross indecency between consenting persons, is going to be repealed. So the difference between a private member's bill and a normal government bill is that the government bill is presented by government. So it goes to cabinet approves it, and they present it to parliament in order to debate and vote on. Now, a private member's bill is when a member of parliament decides to present it on his behalf. So he's not presenting the law on behalf of government, he's presenting as a member of parliament. And so the procedure when it is a member of parliament who is presenting the bill as opposed to the government presenting the bill is a bit different. One is of course time. So government bills are given priority and it moves through much faster in the legislative process. Whereas private member's bill can take a long time. Years sometimes, most of the time, they actually never get passed because the government will always prioritize their bills as opposed to someone who's not in government. I think most members of government sincere or committed to decriminalization, it come forward as a government member's bill because responsibility for the penal code is with the Minister for Justice. He is the minister who can present bills to amend the penal code. Unfortunately, our Minister of Justice is homophobic, and it has been very clear in some of his decisions and statements that he is a rabid homophobe. This is the kind of justice minister we have, so we cannot expect someone like him to say he now wants to push forward a bill to decriminalize same-sex sexual relations. That's not the same for everyone else in cabinet. Fall under their jurisdiction or their responsibility to present a bill of that nature. So the only way it could have gone through is through a private member's bill. Once a private member presents a bill, the responsible minister in government can submit a letter of no objection. And the letter of no objection is submitted, then you can take that bill up for debate pretty soon. Yes, of course, the Justice Minister did not present that letter of no objection, so which means that you need to wait for 6 months from the time the bill is presented to Parliament in order to actually proceed with any debates or votes. So we've had a reading of the bill, which was in April last year. We had a second reading of the bill in December last year, and now we're waiting for one more reading for the bill. I think all human rights are important at all times. Recognizing the human rights of one individual is not going to reduce the human rights of someone else. It will only increase everyone's human rights. This law, as it stands, and the gross intrusion it has on people's personal lives, and the power it gives to police to arbitrarily interpret them. And this is not only limited to LGBT people. Sexual people have also been subjected to this kind of gross intrusion. It is important because it gives us dignity of our private space, and it allows primarily LGBT people to no longer be afraid to live and to be who they are and how they're born as, and that's a very important thing. It's very difficult to find give an exact number because of how the reporting is done by the police. The crime statistics, the offences of carnal intercourse against order of nature, and grave sexual abuse are pumped together. The annual statistics are showing arrests ranging from 600 to 700, but we don't know exactly how much of that is limited to sexual relationships between consenting adults and how much of that is limited to actual abuse. Because these offences, you're a criminal irrespective of consent. So that distinction is not made in the police. But I know from my last few years of working in this sector, on average a year, just for iProbono itself, so as one organization, we have around 10 cases every year. I mean, how can culture be destroyed because you're allowing for consenting people to have their private relationships in private? It is not a culture of prejudice, and it is not a culture of violence. What is happening in the law as it stands, everything that is against our culture. And this law itself is not a Sri Lankan law. This law was given to us by the British. It's a foreign Western law that has been imposed into Sri Lanka, and which we haven't decolonized ourselves from yet. Actually amending and repealing this law, we are decolonizing ourselves. We are reverting back to our historical roots and our cultural roots. When you read about the richness of our culture, the richness of South Asian culture and history, LGBT people were revered. There are representations of LGBT people in temples, in Hindu mythology, and it was seen as some kind of aberration. It was British colonialism, European colonialism, which did not like the freedom, the liberation, the openness of our culture, and restricted it through their very awful way of controlling the societies they were in. So we're decolonizing, we're actually going back to our culture. It was actually actually a remarkable determination of the court. We have to remember that this bill is just one page long. That's it. It's a one-page bill because it's a simple change. The Supreme Court determination was 44 pages. What the Supreme Court did give a very clear message to their determination. Passing of this law will only increase the fundamental rights of all citizens. It will lead to the state finally fulfilling its obligations to all citizens. It will actually mean that all people finally become equal before the law. Arguments that were presented in that case by people saying it's going to lead to a rise in child sexual abuse, the spread of HIV, but very subtly gave a response saying these arguments descend on the realm of the absurd. But there's no evidence or statistics to support those arguments. We are living in an age where there is rampant child sexual abuse happening. Parents are very free to give children smartphones which have access to the internet, where children can easily access pornography. Now the average age for accessing pornography is 8 years, where abusers can very easily access children online. But when we give all these tools and we really expose our children to all forms of violence and threats, etc., we are not teaching children on how to protect themselves from it. And sexual and reproductive and relationship education is part of that, is a very critical part of that education. When you inform children, this is what sex is. This is what a healthy relationship is. This is what consent is. Teach those things to a child. They will know, they will be empowered that if someone touches them without their consent, that is a form of abuse and violence. It's a very good idea to ensure that children have access to comprehensive sexual and relationship education. Decriminalization of same-sex relations, women's rights bills, and abortion. Decriminalizing abortion. That should be a priority. In Sri Lanka, you have anywhere between 700 to 1,000 illegal abortions that happen every day. That means around 365,000 women's lives are being put at risk every year because they're being subjected to illegal and unsafe abortions. In Sri Lanka, abortion is not even permitted when a woman has been raped or is the subject of incest, which means that cases of children as young as 11 who are forced to go through pregnancies when they've been raped, that is a crime in itself. I don't think any society should force any child or any person to undergo a forced pregnancy. It's a woman's body, and whatever is in that woman's body, it's her choice of what she wants to keep in her body or not. And I don't think it should be anyone else's business to tell a woman. For me, that's a priority. Legislative change as well.